Yeah, yeah.
Hi guys, welcome back to another video. Today's video we are going to be doing my full week of workouts, my current routine, giving you all the tips, tricks, form corrections, everything, full split, everything is going to be in this video. It has been a hot minute since I did my last full week of workouts. It was during lockdown. I was working out with my dad in the background. We were really making the best of not the most ideal training situation, but we are back in the gyms now. This is my first workout post back on YouTube in a very long time. I've changed up how I kind of do it. I've had a bit of more of a think about how I want to film things and the content I sort of want to be putting on my channel. So please let me know what you think of the kind of filming style. I've basically gone for more helpful angles as opposed to the most flattering angles. So let me know what you think. Dan did help me film some of these workouts, so thank you very much to Dan. I think most of them he did film other than one of the lower body workouts because he was in Manchester that day. So I just went and I took my tripod and I filmed. I'm super excited to be doing this video. It's been so highly requested and I really hope it is as helpful as possible. I have a new laptop now, I've got new editing software, so let me know what you think about the editing style of this video as well. I want to give you the background into my training program. I've been training for a long time now. I started going to the gym properly when I was about 17, 18 and I'm now 23. Now that time frame has not been me knowing exactly what I'm doing, and I'd say in the past 1 to 2 years I've learned significantly more. When I first started posting workouts on YouTube, I really genuinely, it wasn't ill-intentioned, I really thought I knew a lot more, and I feel like the more I learn, the more I'm I feel now like I know less than ever before, but I'm perfectly comfortable with that because I actually feel like that's probably a better way to be, to feel like you know less rather than thinking that you know a lot more. I'm comfortable with saying I don't know the answers to things, and I'm very comfortable with letting you guys know I do not know everything that there is to know about fitness and training, and anyone that says that they do is lying. They're flat out lying. And I mean, even if you go back and look at my first workout video, you can really see, if you compare that to this video, you're gonna see the gains that I've made and the muscle growth that I've made. If you are new here, then you won't know the context of how I got into the gym, but basically my goals are normally growth related as opposed to weight loss. I started off super tiny and I've managed to pack on a decent amount of muscle. This training program I have been running properly for only a few weeks. I wrote it up before Christmas time, but then Christmas, New Year, all that sort of stuff, I actually started a new gym, so I'm kind of still finding my feet with it. I train 4 to 5 times a week. This video is going to show you all 5 workouts, but realistically it's 4 to 5 times a week, and if I'm doing 4 times a week I will do 2 upper, 2 lower, because I'm really trying to balance my physique. In terms of the real focus points for my program, glute focus is always there because it's what I love training, it's what I really enjoy. And I just really enjoy it. In particular, the upper glute region. For quite a big chunk of last year, I was really focusing on a lot of more lunging movements and stretching motions in my lower body workouts, and not doing as much hip thrusting, not doing as much bridges, not doing as much kickbacks, the more shortened movements which are going to work on the upper portion of your glutes a little bit more. I kind of took a break from them just because I was getting bored. Setting up hip thrusts was really pissed me off. So I took a bit of a break and focused more on stretching movements, but I really wanted to work a little bit more on my upper glute region. So we've got a good mix of lengthened and shortened position movements in there. My quads, if you watch this video guys, my quads and hamstrings and overall leg development has come on leaps and bounds, and I will touch more on that as I go throughout the video. Quads, hamstrings, I'm even training calves, can you believe it? And then upper body, shoulders, back, biceps, triceps, really pushing and trying to make some muscle growth development, strength developments there. I personally do not train chest. That's not a preference, that's not something that I just don't want to do. I can't train chest. I was very foolish and I got implants at the ripe old age of 19. They're under the muscle. Some people are fine training with implants under the muscle. For me personally, I find it really really quite uncomfortable, and so I cannot train chest. So for me personally, for upper, it makes more sense for me to do push and pull rather than doing a push session and a pull session. Because I can't train chest, it just, a full session of push just feels a little bit redundant. So that explains that. If you are wanting to use this as inspiration, add in some chest work if you want to the upper days. So we're gonna get into the workouts now. I'm gonna be running you through some form tips. Just to know, in this video, I'm fully gonna like analyze my own form, because my form is not perfect on some things, in particular back squats, which we're gonna be going over first. Part of it's to do with my anatomy. I'm never gonna be the best squatter in the world because I have weirdly long thighs. It annoys the shit out of me. I so wish I was like 5 foot, but I'm not. So squats are always a harder movement for me. So they're not perfect. There's other movements where I've picked up on things after filming that I think, oh, actually I would probably tweak that, and I'm gonna signpost those as we go through the video to make sure that you guys have got the best information possible. By the way, guys, I've just realized I didn't film my warm-ups in this video. I have gone over warm-up sets on the lower body 3 session and explained them a bit, but I've not included my warm-ups. If you do want my warm-ups, they will be with the program linked below. I have also tweaked that program slightly, so don't think you can just read the program and not watch the video. You need to watch the video because I've actually tweaked it a little bit. So if you're wondering why it doesn't match up exactly, it's because I tweaked it a little bit as I've gone. But the warm-ups that I do for all of my sessions are included in that, and you do need to warm up before your sessions. Just wanted to put that in there. So lower body session number 1, we've got quads, glutes and hamstrings. Just to note on this really quickly, for my lower workouts, I used to do glutes and hamstrings, glutes and quads. That's a perfectly fine split for you to follow for your lower sessions. If you are training lower 3 times a week, like I said, for me it's 2 to 3 times a week depending on the week. But for me personally, since I started kind of just sprinkling in a little bit here, there and everywhere, I've definitely seen better growth and better results on top of a few other things that I have switched around. But I do feel like that's kind of important to know as to why my sessions aren't glutes and hamstrings, glutes and quads anymore. It's not a bad split to have. I just noticed that my legs, like my overall leg development, has got a lot better since I started doing it kind of a bit more grouped into each session rather than trying to split things up a bit more. So exercise number 1, we are on back squats. This clip is actually my second set because I'm going to show you my first set afterwards, and my form needed a little bit of a tweak. So as you are unracking the weight, really important to make sure that you've got both feet steady underneath the bar as you are unracking the weight. It's very common for people to kind of do almost a split stance, and I used to do this, and it feels really weird when you switch from doing a kind of split stance as you are unracking the bar to go to both legs kind of directly under the bar as you unrack it. It does feel weird. In terms of how you want to adjust the setup of the squat rack in order to make sure that it's in the right position for you to be unracking the weight, you want it to be about here. So if you go and stand next to it, you want it to be about here, just so that you're not having to really like go up on your tippy toes, because then when you come to re-racking it, you've got a lot more chance of shit really hitting the fan. You're gonna walk back a couple steps. So as you initiate the movement, for me personally, I'm trying to make sure that my hips and knees are breaking at the same time, because I want to keep this as just a standard squat. If you are wanting to do a more glute bias squat, you're going to be focusing a lot more on really sending the hips back before you break at the knees to make it more glute dominant. But as I'm just doing a standard squat, breaking at the hips and the knees simultaneously, everyone's squat is going to look different. As you can see here, I actually have pretty decent depth. However, one thing that I would change about my squat here, which I'm going to pause it and kind of highlight it, is I would do my stance a little bit wider. Ideally, you kind of want your stance to be sort of shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit wider. I'm actually a little bit too narrow here, and I do think that's contributed to me having a pretty severe butt wink in my first set. This was my second set. I'm going to show you my first set in a second, because after the first set I rewatched the footage. This is the importance of recording your sets as well. I did rewatch the footage, and I did notice that my butt wink was pretty severe, and I was just exceeding my range of motion, like hip mobility, ankle mobility, all that stuff aside. Because of the way I am built, First of all, I'm always going to have more of a forward lean in my squats. I'm never going to be able to stay super upright. Like, anatomically, it's just not going to happen. But also, I'm probably never going to get ass to grass without butt winking. So for me personally, I like to not go ass to grass and just focus on minimizing the butt wink as much as I can. But yeah, stance wise, I would personally bring my feet out a little bit more on this movement. So I'm going to show you my first set here, and as you can tell, if you go and compare it to the set I've just showed you, I am going a lot lower and butt winking quite a bit more. Another thing that I really wasn't focusing on this set because I just didn't have my head in the game. This is something that I go over with clients a lot. It's something that I learned from Eugene Teo's videos, and that is, if you notice that you are butt winking a lot in your squats, sometimes it's hip mobility, sometimes it's ankle mobility, sometimes it's just your anatomy. A lot of the time it can be the setup at the top of a squat, so you could be pushing, really sending your hips back before, and that can cause a butt wink in some people. Equally, you could be letting the bar control you rather than you controlling the bar, which means you're not keeping your core strong and you're just kind of coming down under the weight as opposed to really controlling the weight on the way down and on the way back up. And that was definitely something that I was doing on the first set, which was contributing towards the butt winks. I was really cautious of controlling the weight and not letting the weight control me on the second set. And you can even tell in like the speed of the reps and stuff, it got a lot better. Weight wise for this, I personally am still squatting fairly light. As you can see, I'm only doing 50 kg here, and that's because I took back squats out for a long time, just because they're my hardest movement, and to be honest, I just wanted to avoid them. So I took them out for a long time, so I'm really starting from scratch with these. I'm not going to be ego lifting with them. I really want to work on perfecting my form before we up the weights, but those are just some little tips for your squats, and an example of a slightly better squat, and just an example of a slightly better set. The first set that I showed you, and then the second set, which was technically my actual first set, but my form wasn't quite as good, and some little tips for you. So I hope that helps. Then we are moving on to B stance hip thrust. So setup wise, as you can see here, you want, to be fair, this also isn't quite perfect. It's not too bad, but it's not quite perfect. You want the heel of the non-working leg, and I say non-working leg in quotation marks because it's not a true unilateral exercise. The other side of your body, the non-working side, is still going to be working. It's not a true unilateral movement, but the non-working leg heel should ideally, for anything B stance, be in line with the toe of your working leg's foot. It's a pretty decent B stance. As you can see, we've got the 90-degree angle with the shin at the top. Setup wise, I'm using this kind of decline bench, which I've actually been enjoying a lot more. Like I said, I'm training at a new gym now, so finding the setup has been kind of difficult, but this is definitely the best setup for me. It hits just about on the bottom of my sports bra. Oh, she's really pushing through those reps. Yeah, it just hits at the right point. Then obviously, because it is a unilateral movement, we are going on to the other leg. Yeah, the main thing that I would always note with any kind of like, whether it's a hip thrust, a cast glute bridge, a B stance hip thrust, make sure you are locking out properly at the top. These movements are aiming to work your glutes in the shortened position, and where they're going to be the most engaged in that movement is at the top in the shortest position. So if you're not locking out properly, you are missing out on glute gains. So make sure that you are locking out properly. I know it can be tempting to rack loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of weight on the bar because everyone seems to be hip thrusting like 200 kilos, but if you're not controlling the weight and if you're not getting the proper lockout, the full lockout at the top, your torso kind of wants to be like a table, you're not really getting the most out of that movement. I do have other tips for hip thrusts and cast glute bridges, but they are also in my program, so I'm going to give you those tips when we get to it in terms of like pelvis position, back positioning, all that sort of stuff. So B stance hip thrust, one leg, other leg, rest, then we go into it. In terms of resting between legs, this isn't something that I used to do, but I do now rest for roughly anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute between legs, and I have noticed a big difference in the output I'm able to get in that second set. Then we are moving on to B stance RDLs, all of the B stances today. So this is actually a much better example. You can see that those toes are lined up with the heel of my working leg. We are pushing the hips back. You are not just bending forwards with this movement. You want to be pushing the hips back, bending in the knee slightly just to make it a little bit, squeeze a little bit more glutes out of it, as opposed to just being hamstrings. But it is a glute and hamstring movement. I get asked this all the time. I'm feeling RDLs in my hamstrings. You're never not going to feel them in your hamstrings. Even if you've tried to glute bias them, they're going to be recruiting your hamstrings still. It's completely normal to feel your hamstrings within the movement. Yeah, there's not really too much else to say on that. Hip hinging, if you struggle with a hip hinge movement, something that I do with clients all the time, go to a wall, step about 2 to 3 steps in front of the wall, and then you are going to focus on trying to push the wall away with your glutes. So trying to touch the wall with your bum, imagining there's a button on the wall, and that really helps people to learn the cue of sending your hips back as opposed to just bending forwards. But yeah, B stance RDLs being done there. So I did one leg and then I did the other. Again, I do rest between my single leg exercises now. Other things to know on this movement is you want to be keeping your chin tucked. You don't want to be straining your neck, looking up in the mirror. You don't want to be looking side to side. Chin tucked as you can. Give yourself a little bit of that double chin, and keeping that dumbbell, barbell, whatever it is that you're using on a hip hinge movement as close to your legs as you possibly can. You don't want to be holding the dumbbell or the barbell really far out in front of you. You will find then you're getting a lot of rounding through your spine and you're putting a lot of pressure on your back. Keep it as close to your legs as you can. A really good cue that I've learned for that is imagine that you are painting your shins with the dumbbell or the barbell. Keep it as close as you can, just really pushing the hips back. We have then got leg extensions. So with these, with any kind of seated movement, this and leg press, I really think it helps if you can really pull yourself into the seat. That's what I'm trying to do here, and you want to be really extending as much as you can. I've included this second clip because this was actually my last set, and you can see that my form, as opposed to my first set, which I just showed you, was starting to suffer slightly. I wasn't quite able to come all the way up as much as I would have liked. Like you can see on that rep, I was really really struggling to get that weight up, didn't quite get it up there. So after leg extensions, we're now moving on to standing cable abduction. So we are setting the cable up at the bottom of the stack, because as you can see, it doesn't go right to the bottom, and I really like to do my standing cable abductions with the attachment right at the bottom, as opposed to it being like a little bit up, so then my leg kind of has to come like more of a swinging motion, and I almost have to bend my leg to keep it this way. Another thing that I could do here to improve this would be to stand on a plate to try and keep my leg as straight as I can whilst I'm abducting it out to the side. But yeah, I'm doing my standing cable abductions here, just kicking out straight to the side. So this isn't a glute medius kickback, and it's also not a straight up glute kickback. It's just a standing cable abduction. So we're going to be working glute medius, yes, glute minimus also as well. Yeah, I love doing these, and I've noticed since adding these back into my program a lot of upper glute growth development. Moving on, we've got upper body day 1, push and pull. Starting off with a plate loaded lat pull down. I way prefer this to a cable lat pull down. I don't know why, it just feels a lot smoother, it feels a lot better of a movement. So when you are sitting on the machine, you really want to make sure that the adjustment that sits on top of your thighs is really locking you in, so that you're not kind of coming up and out of the seat on each rep. You want to make sure that you are stretching all the way up. Back movements, I'm going to say this throughout this video, the stretch and the squeeze is key. A critique that I do have of my form here, and this is something that a lot of people are guilty of, and I'm including myself in that, I got so used to filming my workouts to make my body look good, or to look how everyone else is looked on Instagram, good in quotation marks, that I got very used to kind of really anterior pelvic tilting when I was doing my back day machine movements. So really like duck arsing basically, really like sitting kind of like that. Now there's nothing wrong with leaning back a little bit when you're doing a lat pull down. Leaning back a little bit is fine, but the issue that you can see here on this clip is that I'm leaning back, yes, but I'm also really pushing my hips back. I got into the habit of doing that because I'm not even going to put it on other people, but it is what you see everywhere on Instagram. For a long time I did actually think that was just the way to do it, but try if you can. Some people do just have an anterior pelvic tilt and they need to work on their posture, or they might have postural issues and it's just something that they're always going to have. But if it's not an issue that you have, try and make sure that you're not really super like pushing your bum back when you're doing any kind of movement in the gym. You don't have to do that. Just something I really want to point out here. It's very, very, very normal when you are breathing in the gym, when you're bracing, for your ribs to expand, for your stomach to expand. Your stomach isn't going to look tiny when you're training. If you are breathing and bracing correctly, it's going to puff out, your ribs are going to kind of come out. It's very, very, very normal. This would be an angle that I have to be honest, in the past I would have edited out, but I'm just kind of over filming my workouts from sus angles to make everything look good. I want this content to be helpful. So yeah, that's just an example of maybe not the most flattering angle, but that's just how your body looks when you train. But you can also really tell there, I'm really trying to push my bum back. It's just a habit that I need to get out of. But yeah, plate loaded lat pull downs. And then moving on to, I've split the screen here so you can see that I'm doing it on both arms. We're then moving on to plate loaded single arm rows. This rowing machine, rather than it being like straight back, it's kind of coming from below and up, and I've just really been enjoying doing it. With these sorts of rowing movements, you want to keep your elbow as into your side as you possibly can. That's a cue that I always follow with most of my rowing movements, unless I'm trying to do it more of a wide grip. I will always try and drive my elbow into my side as much as I can and try and keep that elbow as tucked in as I can with my back movements, and again, stretch and squeeze. This machine, you can do it both arms at the same time, but I'm doing it single arm, so whilst I'm doing one arm, I'm kind of resting on the seat and kind of pulling, trying not to move the rest of my torso too much whilst also getting a good stretch and squeeze on the movement. We are then moving on to some dumbbell shoulder presses. Now, first thing to note here is the seat setup. You will see that the seat is not flat, it's kind of like upwards a bit, and the bench is also not straight up, it's kind of slanted back. This is actually something that I have only recently started doing because shoulder presses started to feel really uncomfortable for me, and I started doing a little bit of research, looking at YouTube videos, looking on TikTok, and I saw a few people saying to try being in a more kind of, not like a full incline, but a more kind of incline rather than being like straight up against the chair, and it's helped so much. It's a much more comfortable position for me. You want to plant your feet to the floor so that you're not like flying everywhere. You want to be solid. You want to have a solid foundation. You don't want your legs to be like octopusing all over the gym. I used to do shoulder presses very much like here and straight up like that. I've since learned that's not the right way to do it. We live and we learn, and instead you want to bring your elbows a little bit further in as opposed to being like straight out like this. You can tell a bit more in this clip that Dan's done that's more kind of from the side. Another thing to note here just before I explain this is I'm going to move my bum back here. Perfect. You want to make sure that your bum is secure in the seat and that you're not just like kind of just sitting there and not secure in the seat. You want to push your bum back, have your upper back against the thing, bring your elbows forwards a little bit and pressing like that rather than being straight out to the side. It's a lot more comfortable on your shoulder. If you find shoulder presses have always been a bit pinchy for you, I really, really, really recommend that you try this out. In terms of range of motion for shoulder presses, it really depends who you are. Some people say you only need to come to here, some people come down a bit further. I've always liked to try and come down a little bit further. It's just how I like to do it. But yeah, you can tell that I'm not pushing straight out to the side here. I'm more kind of in a little bit and pushing up that way. Moving on, trap city bitch. You can, oh God, does anyone else just have wildly overactive traps? Because same. I am doing dumbbell bicep curls here, so I like to do these seated on a bench because I find that when I stand I can swing a little bit more, putting the tension through my bicep rather than just using momentum, and doing things seated really helps me to make sure that I'm not using momentum as much as possible. So any bicep curl movement, you want to keep your arms kind of as pinched into your sides as you can. Try not to move your elbows around too much. They will move a little bit, but try not to move them around too much. And for these, I'm kind of doing them out to the side as opposed to just straight here, and that's just because I'm sat down and logistically my leg's going to get in the way of the dumbbell. One arm at a time on those. We are then moving into dumbbell seated overhead tricep extension. You want to keep your elbows as pinched into your side as possible as opposed to being super flared out, lowering the dumbbell behind your head and then pressing up. I know that some people aren't a massive fan of this movement, but I like doing it. I think it's really important that yes, you create a program that works for your goals, but you also enjoy it. I'd say my program is a pretty decent mix of optimal and also enjoyable, because for me personally, I don't give a rat's ass how optimal the program is. If it's not enjoyable, I'm not going to do it. We need a mix. We need a mix in there. I do also have cable rear delt flies programmed into that session. However, I don't have them in this video because the cables that I wanted to use were in use. So I didn't get to film that, but I do also do cable rear delt flies on one of my upper body sessions. I try to do it in this one normally, but if I can't, I'll just do it on my other upper body day. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it on either of these, but that is in my program because I want to make sure that I'm not neglecting my rear delt. Moving on to the second lower body workout, we've got a glute and quad kind of more focus. So first off, we have got hip thrusts. So let's talk about the bench setup in a bit more depth. You want to make sure that the bench is kind of bottom of sports bra kind of area. Not any higher, not any lower. You want to keep your chin tucked as much as you can so that your head isn't bashing around, moving around too much. I really move my toes around a suspicious amount when I'm doing this movement. Then as you are coming up, you want a full strong lockout at the top of the movement. You can see the chin is tucked. We've got a full lockout. The shins, to be honest, if I'm going to nitpick, they could, my feet could be a little closer to my bum just to make it more of a perfect 90-degree angle. They're a little bit further out, but that's me being very, very, very nitpicky here. Overall, it's pretty good form. Now, what you're going to notice here is when I come down, I'm not duck-assing again. That's another thing that I did used to do, and it's something that if clients are having backache with their hip thrusts and I ask them to send over a video, it's normally the issue that I see most people doing, which is when they come down on a hip thrust, they're so focused on this kind of scooping motion, which yes, you can still do a scooping motion without doing this, that they really push their hips right back and go into like a severe anterior pelvic tilt on the way down and then scoop back up. Ever since I stopped doing that and I focused on really, instead of going like pushing my hips back on the way down and instead more focusing on really keeping my core tight and keeping my core braced, I've noticed a huge difference, first of all, in how much I feel this movement in my glutes, but second of all, I just don't get any back issues from hip thrusts at all anymore. So yeah, as you can see, we're not duck-assing. This is a hip thrust, so it's a more full range of motion. This was like one of my latter sets. So again, as you can see, the training intensity is there. She's struggling, she's working hard. And we are moving on to the leg press. Before I even get into this clip, no one roast me for the plates that I've got on this leg press. Not that we should be roasting people for how much they're lifting anyway, but when I was at JD, I was doing 3 to 4 plates per side. This leg press machine is fucking humbling. It's such a hard leg press machine. It feels so heavy. But we're going into a leg press. For this, I've not got my feet too high up. I've got them kind of middle of the pad, but more of a narrow stance. quad and glute focus. With leg press, the absolute #1 tip that I would give people is do not exceed your range of motion. If you are coming down to a point where your lower back starts peeling off the seat, you are putting all that weight that you've loaded up on the leg press right through your back. And that's going to cause you a lot of pain, and it's going to cause you a lot of issues, and that's something that you really want to avoid doing where possible. First of all would be don't exceed your range of motion. The second thing to help you from stopping your lower back peeling off the seat, the handles. Use the handles on the leg press. They are there to help you. Use them I mean, you can tell by like the veins on my hands if you look closely. I'm really pulling myself down into the seat. A lot of my clients who get back pain with leg press, when they send over a form video, they've got the hands like this above the head, and their lower back is just completely peeling off the seat at the bottom of the range of at the bottom of their range of motion, at the bottom of the movement. As soon as I say use the handles, really grip and pull yourself into the bottom of that seat. Pain gone, their lower back isn't peeling off the seat anymore. Yeah, so stick with your range of motion and use the goddamn handles. I bailed out of the last rep. I was like, no. Next we are moving on to some narrow stance heel elevated squats. I've not done a goblet squat variation in a while, but recently I've just been loving doing this for my quads. I absolutely love it. Similar to the back squat tip that I gave, control is key. Make sure that you are controlling the weight and you're not just rushing through the reps. Slow and controlled. And again, bailing out of the rep because I was like, nope, I can't do it. Then we are moving on to a little bit of glute isolation. Now these are glute medius kickbacks. So as you can see, I just prefer this cable as opposed to the other one. You want to set it up, get an ankle attachment around your ankle, so like a padded one. Normally your gym might have them. You might have to buy one off Amazon. Mine are from Amazon. They're just the moose ones. I can't remember the specific name. They're pink, if that helps. Or you can use the D-ring attachment depending on what you wear to the gym, because if you don't wear high socks it will dig in, but I have used a D-ring attachment before and been fine. But you will find you can lift a lot more and not have to worry about the D-ring kind of rolling up your calf, especially if you've got no calves like me, if you switch to using a proper attachment. So I would recommend using a proper attachment if possible. In terms of the movement, instead of coming straight back or straight out to the side as you saw on lower body workout 1, it's kind of a diagonal kick out. And on the way in, you want to make sure that you're crossing that working leg over your stationary leg. Another question that I get asked a lot about these is, do I need to be like leaning over? If you go back and watch my old workout videos, I used to really lean and like kick back and basically be parallel with the floor. That's actually a tip that I used to give. I don't do that anymore. Instead, I focus on staying more upright in the movement and just keeping a very like shorter-ish range of motion, but keeping my leg a little bit more straight, crossing over at the front and just kicking back and really controlling the movement, controlling the weight, as opposed to really leaning forwards and just swinging the weight up and down. And another thing that I always get asked is the stationary leg. You are using that leg to stabilize you in the movement, and therefore you are going to feel the movement slightly in that leg. Then we have upper body day 2, push, pull and cardio. So we're starting off with a seated cable row. This is a much better example of what I mean about not duck-arting it. I'm really kind of sitting as neutrally as possible on this. No, it doesn't make your ass look as peachy or as fat, but it is what it is. It's the better for the movement, as opposed to really trying to accentuate the bunda. This seated cable row machine, I have to be completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of it, just because as you can see here, instead of kind of pulling straight back, which is what I kind of prefer to be doing with my seated cable row movements, I'm pulling kind of upwards, and when you are doing the kind of more upwards motion, you're going to be getting a bit more traps in it, which is something that I'm trying to avoid. Not because I think traps look bad, I actually think my traps look pretty cool. It's just because they actually cause me a lot of pain. They're really overactive, and so the more I can do to take my traps out of a movement, the better. But that's just kind of how the pulley is set up on this seated cable row. I have actually considered switching it out. This might be something that I switch out, but I do still like doing it. It's just not my preference, and the way that my body's set up, it's very hard for me to try and pull it more kind of down. Moving on to a unilateral exercise, which is a kneeling single arm pull down. As you can see, I'm twisting my hand to be facing the floor and then twisting it in towards my body as I come down. The reason I do this, and this is the reason I do this, I'm not speaking for anyone else here, is because I find I can really drive my elbow into my side a lot better when my palm is like this, as opposed to my palm being like that. When my palm is like that, my elbow naturally is going to come out a little bit more, whereas when your palm is like this, naturally you're going to be able to drive that elbow into your side a little bit more, as opposed to it coming out a little bit more. And I'm trying to work more of my lats when I'm doing this movement. I absolutely love this movement. This is probably one of my, I would actually say this is my favourite back movement next to the plate loaded lat pull down that I do on my upper body session 1. I just love this movement. We are moving on to some tricep cable push downs. With these, again, I'm going to critique my form here a little bit. My elbows are moving a little too much for my liking at the top of the movement. I would actually bring my hands up, not maybe as much. I'd kind of keep them a little bit above parallel and then push down, seeing as that's where my triceps are going to be working most, as opposed to coming right up, because to be honest, it's impossible to go right up without your elbows kind of coming up as well. So I personally, that's something that I would tweak here, just so I can keep my elbows tucked in. When I'm doing my tricep push downs, I do like to lean forwards a little bit and kind of set my shoulders back a little bit and then pushing down. Then keeping with the cable, we've got cable rope bicep curls. Again, same cues as I gave you with the bicep curls on upper body day number 1. You want to keep your elbows as tucked into your sides as possible. You don't want them to be like flaring out. With these, I actually like to stand back a little bit and kind of get a bit more of this kind of emotion, as opposed to my elbows being like super behind me and up, if that makes sense. So I stand a little bit further back and I kind of come up more diagonally. I just really like doing my bicep curls that way, and with all my movements as slow and controlled as possible. Oh my god guys, this movement for my lateral raises, this setup has been an absolute game changer. So as I've mentioned in this video, your girl has got some overactive trappage going on, okay? And in the winter months, when I tend to hunch a little bit more anyway, because it's cold, I get severe pain. So anything I can do to try and minimize my trap use in an upper body movement, I will do it. I just will. I'm desperate to take them out as much as I can. With any lateral raise movement, your traps are going to be involved. You're not going to be able to take them out entirely. However, I've tried everything. I've tried all the other tips that everyone puts out online. This was the only tip that worked. So I now do them seated, chest supported, and instead of bringing the dumbbells like straight out to the side, I bring them kind of diagonally up like this. So instead of being out to the side, diagonally up like this. And a really good cue is to imagine that you're pushing the kind of corners of the room away. Ever since I did that, I feel these way more in my delts, and my traps don't feel like they're gonna fall off and just like firing on all cylinders. And again, when you're doing things seated, for me personally, I find that I use a lot less momentum, which means I'm really putting the tension on the target muscles as opposed to just swinging the weights around. Trust me, try any exercise, any upper body movement, your lateral raises, your bicep curls, dumbbell, tricep work, anything that you would normally do standing, try it seated, and I can guarantee you'll probably have to drop the weight, because it's a lot. You realise that you can't use the momentum when you're sat down. And with those, I actually use a super light weight. I think normally I can do like 5, maybe 6 kilos for dumbbell lateral raises, and I'm pretty sure I was doing 3 on that. So lower the weight if you're going to try them out, because it's really hard. But if you are someone who struggles to kind of take your traps out of movements, or really let your delts shine, particularly on a lateral raise variation, I really recommend those. Those and cable lateral raises are now pretty much the only lateral raise movements that I involve in my program. Then I decided to do a little bit of cardio. I tried to do 20 minutes of cardio a week. This clip is just really funny, guys, because I really felt like I was running quick. I kept putting the speed up, so I was like walking and then jogging. But the last clip, oh my god, I felt like I was Usain Bolt in, and when I rewatched it, I was like,
I literally look like I'm on a light jog, but it felt so fast to me. Yeah, cardio is super important. And it's something that I'm trying to work on a little bit more this year. I want to be overall healthy, fit and well, as opposed to just having muscles. So yeah, I'm trying to do some cardio. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what possessed me to get on the treadmill, because sprinting is really not my thing. As we can tell, I felt like I was sprinting, I looked like I'm on a light jog. It's not really my thing, I prefer the stairs, but I'm trying new things out this year. It's 2023, let's try new things. On to the final workout of the week, low body 3, hamstrings and glutes focus. So we are doing RDLs here, and I'm doing warm-up sets. This is something that I really wanted to touch on. Warm-up sets, what are they? Let's talk about it. Even if I'm short on time and I don't have time to do my full routine of warming up properly and all that sort of stuff, I, regardless, will still do warm-up sets. I think warm-up sets are really useful, and if you're short on time, it's a really good way to warm up. You're pretty much practicing the movement that you're going to be doing. Now, warm-up sets, do you need to do them for every single movement of your day? No, especially when it gets to isolation work, you really don't need to be doing a warm-up set on your 5th exercise, which is cable kickbacks. You don't need to be doing a warm-up set, you'll be fine. But for your first like 1 to 2 movements, warm-up sets can really help you kind of, first of all, gauge sort of how you're feeling in that session, so you know what weights to be putting on the bar. But also it's just going to get you in the right frame of mind. It's really good for just getting you in the zone for your session, practicing the range of motion that you're going to be doing and building up to the weights. Now, with warm-up sets, you want to be careful to just use them as warm-up sets. The point of a warm-up set is not to exert yourself. So let's say your working set for your RDLs is you can do 60 kg for 8, and that's super challenging. You are not going to be doing a warm-up set of 50 kg for 15 reps, because that's actually probably going to tire you out and take away from your main sets. However, you might want to do a warm-up with the bar for 10 reps, and then you might want to do a warm-up with 30 kg for 8 reps. The point with your warm-up sets is not to be pushing to like an RIR of 1, super close to failure. Your warm-up sets should be nowhere near failure. They're not counted in your weekly volume because they're just not challenging enough. So that reps in reserve for your warm-up sets should be super high. We're talking like 6, 7, 8 reps in reserve. They shouldn't be challenging sets. They are just there to warm you up. So that's a little tidbit on warm-up sets. So I was warming up with the bar, and then I did a couple warm-up sets, and then we got into the working sets. So I'm going with 60 kg, and then I worked my way up to about 75. I don't use straps currently because the straps I really want from 1MR are currently out of stock. So I'm waiting for those to restock, and then I'm going to get them because grip is a limiting factor. I went up to just below 75 kilos and I got about 4 reps. And it was my grip that gave way. My legs could have kept going, but do not become reliant on straps. If you're just starting out, please do not invest in a pair of straps yet. You do not need them. You should be prioritizing your actual grip strength first and actually just using your grip as opposed to jumping in straight away with lifting straps. You don't need them. If you are a beginner, you really don't need them. The only time you should be getting straps is if you've been lifting for a while and it's your grip which is really limiting you in terms of what you can lift, and it's stopping you from progressively overloading. That is when you invest in straps, not right at the beginning. You don't need them. Don't let anyone feel like you need to buy that equipment when you're just starting out. Form tips for RDLs. As I said, you are going to want to be imagining that there's something behind you that you're trying to push with your bum, pushing your hips back. You're not just bending forwards, you are pushing your hips back. The positioning of your knees is going to be impacted by what you're trying to bias. If you're trying to do a bit more of a hamstring bias, there will still be a bend in the knee, but a slight bend in the knee. But a very slight bend in the knee. If you're trying to bias your glutes a little bit more, you're going to have a stronger bend in the knee. With the ones I'm doing here, it's a little bit more glute focused as opposed to being hamstring focused, so I've got a little bit more bend in the knee. Talking range of motion, as soon as you cannot push your hips back anymore in an RDL, that is the end of your range of motion, and that's when the bar needs to be coming back up. You do not need to push past that point. If you push past the point where your hips can't come back anymore, all that's going to happen is your back is going to start rounding to help you get lower, and then you're putting that weight not through your hamstrings and glutes, that's going through your back, and that's why you're getting back pain. That's point number one. Point number two is the setup. Are you bracing properly? Are you breathing properly? If you are not bracing properly on things like squats and RDLs, to be honest, in particular, you can find that you will have very, very intense lower back pain. There's a difference between an ache and a pain. It is going to work your lower back region slightly, so you might have a little bit of an ache, but a pain is a very different thing. And if you're getting pain but your form looks fine, check that you are bracing properly, check that you are engaging your core properly. It's not going to look pretty, it's not going to look cute, but it's super, super, super important that you are engaging your core properly and keeping it strong and keeping it tight. If you struggle to know whether you are bracing or not properly, Meg Squats has a really, really good video and tips. I think it was on TikTok, but I swear she's done it on YouTube as well, about bracing, and the absolute best tip and cue that I've got, I don't know if it's her who came up with it, but she's the person that I got it from, is if you put the tongue to the roof of your mouth and you try and make a huh, huh sound, that's the kind of sensation that you want to be getting when you're bracing your core. So even if you need to keep the tongue to the roof of your mouth to help you brace when you're learning how to brace in your movements, go for it. There's nothing wrong with it, and if it helps you brace and it helps you keep your lower back safe and healthy, we are all for that over here. Yeah, and then on the way up, you don't need to excessively push your glutes forwards, just come back up. You don't need to hyperextend, just coming back up in the movement and then back down. Chin tucked, like I said, not looking up, not looking around, not putting any pressure through your neck. You want your spine and your neck to be as in line as possible. And they are like my best tips for your RDLs. I did also film a little clip of me trying to do 75. My grip was really just not having it from the front, just so you can see where my hands are. My hands are a little bit outside my knees. That's the grip that I use, and I personally do one over, one under, and I do try and rotate it, but I do find that I do have a stronger version of it, and that's when this hand is over and this hand is under. We are then moving on to calves glute bridges. So I've already gone over the setup. The only difference, guys, between a calves glute bridge and a hip thrust is the range of motion. A hip thrust is a more full range of motion, so you're coming right down, right back up. It's going to involve a little bit more of quads and hamstrings, whereas a calves glute bridge, if you don't know where that name came from, by the way, it came from Coach Kasim. But to be honest, it is just a pulsing hip thrust. So you will see people call it a calves glute bridge. You will also see people call it a pulsing hip thrust. It's the same thing. People do typically tend to call it a calves glute bridge, but if you are wondering where that name came from, it's not some kind of like magical thing. It's just because this movement kind of came from Coach Kaz. It takes a lot of your quads and hamstrings more out of the movement, and it does focus it a lot more on your glutes, and it's a lot more really hyper focusing on the shortened position. Same form tips as a hip thrust, the only difference is the range of motion is much shorter. So as you can see, I'm not coming down as much as I would with a hip thrust. It's a much shorter range of motion. To be honest, these are probably actually a little bit too much range of motion for a calves glute bridge, but they're not like awful. I would probably shorten the range of motion slightly though. Some people, in terms of which is harder to do, some people will say hip thrusts and some people will say calves glute bridges. In my opinion, it depends which you do more of. If you've only ever done hip thrust and you move to calves glute bridges, you'll find you have to drop the weight and you find it a lot harder because you might not be as strong in that shortened portion of a thrusting motion. However, if you're someone that just does calves glute bridges and you don't do as much hip thrusting, when you then go to hip thrust, you might find that you have to drop the weights with that because you are not used to doing a more full range of motion with more quad and hamstring involvement. So in my opinion, it depends what you do more of, which is going to be harder. I don't personally think one is like way better than the other. I like doing both. Let's be honest, before calves glute bridges became this big thing, people have been hip thrusting for years and seen amazing results. So let's not like completely discard hip thrusts. I think doing both is great. If you prefer one to the other and just want to do one, fine. they will work your glutes in the shortened position. It's just that a CAS glute bridge is more hyper focused on that shortened position, and it's a much shorter range of motion. Moving on, we've got some Bulgarian split squats. I'm gonna be honest, kept this clip in purely because I was like, damn, the leg gains are really thriving. Also, by the way, I do have cellulite. This lighting really emphasizes it, but a lot of girls who lift have cellulite. This clip is just my favourite because I feel like it really does highlight the leg gains that have been made. If anyone wants to humble me and tell me I've made no progress, then feel free. But yeah, Bulgarian split squats. So when you are doing the setup, the bench that I'm using is a bit lower than a standard bench. I know that some people like to do it off like a plate or like a super low surface to not get as much of a stretch on your quads and to kind of focus it a bit more on your glutes. But for me personally, I just like doing them this way on like not too high a bench, but like a decent heighted bench. I like doing them this way. Some people will also move their foot further out to make it more glute dominant. For me personally, the way that I'm doing these currently in my program, these are quad and glute engaging. So it's not super far out, and I'm still doing the sinking back in the movement, which you're going to see. I'm still doing that sinking back kind of motion. You can see I'm kind of coming up and then coming down at a kind of diagonal, but I haven't gone for a super wide stance because I want to be working my quads and my glutes. My whole legs, to be honest, are on fire after I've done these. Slow and controlled as always. With any leg movement, you want to be keeping it slow and controlled, taking a rest between legs. That's something that I always do now. And then this is the other leg, and this is also an angle that I would have been so scared to show even a year ago because it's not as flattering as the other one, but that's how it looks. That's just how it looks. And that's how everyone's will look pretty much when you film it from that angle. So yeah, just completing my other leg and then dying, to be honest. Then final movement that I got on record, because actually calf raises were after this, but the machine was in use and I just didn't have time to wait for it, so I did have to leave the gym unfortunately. But I do calf raises after this. Hamstring curl, I'm still getting to grips with this machine because it's very awkward to get into compared to the one that was at JD, and it's much more angled, like the bit that you lie on is much more angled as opposed to JD. So when you're doing a hamstring curl, you want the pad to kind of, when you're adjusting it, make sure that you adjust it properly for your height, because you don't want it to be on like the very bottom of your foot, but you also don't want it to be like behind your knees. You kind of want to go for like a lower calf point in terms of where the pad is going to be resting. Again, use the handles to grip you into the machine, use the elbow pads, grip yourself in, lock yourself in. And then the main thing where people tend to go wrong, the main tip I would give for a hamstring curl would first of all be not controlling the weight. You need to control the weight, slow and controlled. Don't just fling the weight up, really do it with intention. And another thing would be, and you can see I'm kind of doing it here, and I think it's just because I'm not used to this machine yet, try and keep your hips as driven into that pad, as locked into that pad as you can. You don't want to be flinging the weight up and your hips coming up at the same time. You really want to lock your hips into the pad that you are lying on as much as you can. I've always preferred to do a lying hamstring curl as opposed to a seated one. It's just my personal preference. I've always preferred it. I've always found it more comfortable. But yeah, when you are doing them lying, make sure that you really try and keep your hips as driven into that pad as you possibly can and that they're not coming up. And that's it. That's it, girl. So yeah, that is my full week of workouts. Like I said, everything's going to be linked down below in terms of the program. There are a few things that I tweaked. For example, something off the top of my head that I can think of is one of my lower days, it wasn't B-stance RDLs, it was barbell reverse lunges. I found because of the intensity that I was putting into my other quad movements, my recovery was really not good when I was doing barbell reverse lunges. And I also really want to work on my hamstrings. Hamstrings is something that I really want to work on. So obviously I've got my standard RDLs and I've got my hamstring curls. So I decided, why don't I actually just do B-stance RDLs instead of barbell reverse lunges? Then I'm taking a little bit more volume off my quads so I can recover properly, and I'm adding a little bit more to my hamstrings because I just felt like I could recover
with a little bit more hamstring volume, and I'm really trying to grow the hammies this year. So that's why I tweaked that. But yeah, there's a few tweaks, like won't match up perfectly. But I really hope this video has been enjoyable. I have fucking loved filming this video for you guys. I love educational workout content. I just love it. Let me know what other kind of workout content you want to see. Let me know what other videos you want to see. Full week of workout wise, realistically, I can't do this like once a month because I don't change my workouts up once a month. But if you guys would want to see some more variation of upper body workouts, some more variation of lower workouts, I don't mind throwing myself off plan for one day, maybe every other week, to film a different workout and give you guys some inspo. If you want more in-depth form videos, how to bias things for certain muscle groups, all that sort of stuff, just let me know. But I'm hoping this video, I've given you a couple of biasing tips anyway and helped you. This year I'm going to be investing a lot more into my education and making sure that I'm really keeping up to date with things as much as possible in terms of training, research, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to be trying to enroll on some courses this year, which I'm super excited about. I just want to give you guys and my coaching clients the best possible information that I can. The fitness industry is constantly changing, and if you don't keep up with it, you're going to be missing out on the new information. And you're just going to be potentially missing out on gains as well, because as we learn more about what might be a little bit more optimal. Like I said, I'm not saying this is the most optimal program in the world and everything I do is the most optimal way of doing things, but it's a pretty fucking good program, if I do say so myself. It's a pretty good program, and it's also one that I really enjoy. And I'm probably going to stick with it for another like 8 weeks-ish, I would probably guess. And then if you want me to do another full week of workouts when I change it up, let me know. But yeah, thank you so much for watching the video. If you have any questions about anything at all that I've gone over in this video, let me know. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, because it really helps out my channel. Let me know what you think of the workout footage, if you find it more helpful to be filmed from these sorts of angles as opposed to the angles that I used to film from, editing style, all that sort of stuff. Let me know what you think of the format. Super open to feedback. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in my next YouTube video. Bye. Cheers.